I've only told a few people in my life this story. I really didn't understand it as a child. I was 12 years old when this happened. I was in 5th grade. My childhood was kind of crazy though, and I was held back a year from all the moving around, so 5th grade. We had just moved to a small town in Texas from Dallas where my mom's most recent marriage had failed. I wasn't used to small towns and was pretty gullible for my age. We moved into a tiny little house, almost a shack, but it was in an older part of the town. I'm not sure if all states have neighborhoods like this, but in Texas, the historical districts of smaller towns are odd, in that they originally built very large, very nice houses right next to small crappy ones. The old nice ones seem to mostly remain nicely restored, where the smaller ones fall into disrepair, so you have these strange neighborhoods where one block is full of very well-to-do people in nice old homes driving luxury cars, right next to a block that feels like a third-world ghetto. I lived on the ghetto block. My school was about 4 blocks away. The bus wouldn't even pick you up so close, and my mom didn't own a car. So I walked to school and walked by this house every day. Even here it stood out. Huge 2-story home, red brick, large white columned porch. The yard was immaculate. It looked like someone wealthy must have lived there, and being so poor, that was impressive to me. I had heard stories about the owner. He would yell at kids and throw rocks, spray the water hose at anyone who tried to cut across his yard, and it was a large corner lot. He always seemed to be outside on my way to and from school, but he never said anything to me, so I never gave it much thought. I had been walking by for about a month before he ever said anything to me. I should say here that even though I was only 12, I was tall for my age and developing early. I also dressed really inappropriately. Not really on purpose, but I was growing, we were poor, and my clothes fit poorly, and Texas was very, very hot without air conditioning at home. So I wore as little as possible. I was not completely stupid, though, and didn't mind the attention from teenage guys. I really didn't have any friends since we moved so often. About a month after walking by, he talked to me for the first time. He just said, "Hi, sure is hot out here," or something along those lines. I just agreed with him and said I was dying, I was so hot, and he offered me a soda. I don't know why I agreed. I guess I just really did want a soda, and he brought me over an unopened one. After this, he would talk to me every day. Not long conversations, just about the weather, school, where I was from. He looked a little creepy, honest. Always wore a cap, had that look that people get from working outside all their lives, coupled with, I don't know, chain smoking and a poor diet. But his house was so nice, for some reason I decided he must be a nice person too. After a month of passing by and short small talk, he mentioned he had a pool, and if I wanted to see it. It was late May, and that sounded good. And since he'd seemed so trustworthy, I don't know, I was really stupid back then. He brought me through the house and I checked out the pool. I had never seen someone who had a pool at their house. It seemed unbelievable. He said I could swim anytime I wanted. Then, for the first time, he looked at me and it's like his whole demeanor changed and he said, "I'd love to see those tits and that ass. Damn, we don't wear clothes here." Honestly, it wasn't even the words, it was the way he said it. The immediate change in demeanor and the tone of voice. I felt like I was in serious danger, but had no idea what to do. Then he grabbed my shorts as if he was going to pull them down, and I started crying. It's like he zoned back into reality and laughed. He stepped away and said, "Well, anytime you want, you better get going," and I left through the gate. I never told anyone and started walking another way to school until summer started. Next school year, I thankfully never saw him outside his house. Then the second month after school started, I hear his crazy story from my mom. He had driven his truck into a Lubby's in a close-by town. He shot 48 people that day. 24 of them died, and he killed himself. He was also apparently stalking 2 of my neighbors. I still don't know how to process all this info. It creeps the hell out of me to this day. When I was little, my parents and my brother moved to another country for a couple of years. I guess they felt like I was too little to go along. Maybe it was because they had to work really hard while they were there, and no one would have time to take care of me or whatever. So they left without me, and my aunt and uncle took care of me. I called my aunt Mom and had a blast with 2 of my cousins. My aunt and uncle had a house in a village near the town where we lived, and we would spend a lot of time in that village. I loved it there. I loved helping with the yard work, taking care of the garden, the farm animals, running around with the kids from the village, taking walks in the beautiful forest nearby. Everything. Everybody there knew each other. There was this guy, I think he was about 20 at the time, who of course everybody knew as well. Sometimes he would come by the house, talk to us. He was sort of a friend of the family, and we all trusted him. One day he came by and said that he was taking a walk in the forest and offered me to come along. I was playing in the yard. My aunt and uncle were nowhere near, and I said, "Okay." I saw no reason to decline since he was a friend. We were walking through the woods, talking. Everything was okay until he stopped, took down his pants, and told me to touch him there. And I did. I couldn't understand what was happening. I didn't know why he would want me to do that. But since I was so little, I didn't have any sexual desires, or knew what was going on, so I had no idea what the point of it all was. I wasn't scared. I didn't run away. I simply did what he asked me to do. No screaming or kicking. No drama at all. We returned from our little walk. I didn't tell anyone what happened that day, but I never forgot. The thing is, the older I got, the clearer I realized what had happened. I started to struggle with this memory more and more, and it gets worse as the years pass. 3 or 4 years ago, I told my aunt and begged her not to tell anybody. She was furious. She cried and hugged me, and after she calmed down, she said maybe it was partly a good thing that I didn't tell her and my uncle about it right away. Because my uncle would have killed that guy. Literally. And he was not worth the jail time and ruining our lives. To this day, no other family member knows about this. I felt so ashamed and angry and guilty for so long, but I feel like I'm starting to make peace with it. It is such a weird thing, and I know that anyone who has been through something like this would understand. I've thought about seeing a therapist, but I feel like I'm dealing with it in my own way. So this story takes place when I was in high school. I was in year 8. I think that's 7th grade in the US. On the first day back in school after the summer holidays, I had design and technology, 3D design, with this really old teacher called Mr. Fielden. He was probably about early to mid-60s if I had to guess, and he had white shaved hair and really bad breath. But apart from the bad breath, I didn't get any weird or bad vibes from him. Until a few weeks into the school year. It started as little offhand comments, such as, "Your hair looks nice today," and "That's a nice shirt." But nothing too weird, just a tad inappropriate to say to a 12-year-old girl. However, as the weeks started to go by, he became creepier and creepier. One day, I was the first one waiting outside of class when he came to the door and told me to come in and not to be shy, 'cause he didn't bite. Which was kinda weird. He then walked me over to my desk and said how nice my hair looked. Again. Then he starts stroking my hair and telling me how shiny it looks and how nice it smells. I was seriously starting to freak out and was almost crying when thankfully someone else walked in and gave him a look. He shot me a creepy smile and walked away. My friend and I were walking down the corridor at lunch when we heard the door to his classroom open and he stood there, telling us to come in and have lunch with him. We said no thank you, as we had already eaten, but he just kept pestering us, saying his wife had baked a cake, and that he would share. We said no again, and walked off, and we heard him slam his door. Towards the end of the year, he started to become more touchy, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to get a teacher in trouble and cause someone to lose their job. The last day of the lesson, we started to pack up our things, and I left my blazer and bag on the coat rack. I started to stand up when he rushed over and told me that he would grab my things, and then he tried to put my blazer on for me. I said that no, it was okay, and that I was capable of getting them myself. He was so persistent and there were other people in the class with me, so I just gave in. When we were leaving, he winked at me and mouthed something. I tried to brush it off and left. Thankfully, he retired at the end of the year. Later that day, I was looking for my pen and found a note in my pocket. It said, "I'll miss you, from D." At that point, I realized that D was Mr. D. Fielden, and that he was probably mouthing at me to check my pocket. I threw the note in the bin and tried to forget about it. Thankfully, he retired at the end of the year, and I never saw him again. But the other day, I was speaking to my boyfriend's older sister, who also attended my school, and we were talking about teachers we remembered. When I told her about Mr. Fielden, she looked at me with a surprised expression and told me that similar things had happened to her friends when they were in his class. Needless to say, I felt a tad sick, and I will forever regret my decision not to report him. So, Mr. Fielden, wherever you are, let's not meet ever again.